Brothers and sisters, it was just over 8 years ago that Pope Francis published his encyclical Laudato Si on the care for our common home. Pope Francis lamented the environmental destruction happening across the world, the pollution, the waste and the throwaway culture, the effects of a changing climate, the deteriorating water quality and shortages, and the wholesale loss of biodiversity. He then spoke about the decline in the quality of human life, the breakdown of society and inequality, which is happening in parallel. It was clear to him that humanity losing its sight of truth and goodness and justice and equity was on the one hand a major cause of environmental destruction, but on the other hand a deteriorating environment was then causing its own round of new human sufferings not seen before in history. Brothers and sisters, if we go back to the very beginning, we can see that God created everything good. But because of the original sin of humanity which brought corruption, disorder and death to humanity, so too creation was also crippled with the same effects: corruption, disorder and death. Humanity, who were originally entrusted with tending and tilling the earth in cooperation with God, were then inflicted with the consequences of their own sin when God said to Adam, "Because you have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth to you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken, you are dust, and to dust you shall return." From that point forward, humanity and the environment, rather than benefiting mutually from each other, have been in a battle. As a farmer priest, I can tell you all about the resulting battle with a disordered, fallen creation. I'm currently dealing with an invasion of feral pigs on the farm. They have no concern for the natural beauty and order that God brought to creation, nor the order that man has attempted to recreate, as they decimate everything in their sight. What the heat, or the dry, or the frost, or the fruit fly, or the rabbits don't destroy, the pigs are in the process of systematically disfiguring and destroying. Such are the consequences of the sin of humanity. Attacks on God's beautiful creation by both humanity and nature itself. The undermining and distorting of God's truth and the loss of divine goodness. It is into this world, brothers and sisters, that Jesus entered under God's plan B to save his fallen creation. So it is that St. Paul, guided by Jesus, instructs us on how to counteract some of these effects of our fallenness. Last Sunday we heard in the second reading the first of 5 weeks of readings from chapter 8 of Romans. St. Paul in chapter 8 of his letter to the Romans focuses on living in the Spirit, with its corresponding fight against that corruption within our fallen human nature. Today, St. Paul reminds us how creation, which also suffered the effects of human sin, is also seeking to be freed of that corruption. He tells us that creation still retains the hope of being freed, like us, from its slavery, and that it is groaning in one great act of giving birth, and not only creation, but all of us who possess the first fruits of the Spirit. We too groan inwardly as we await for our bodies to be set free. So, brothers and sisters, not only humanity, but all of creation is waiting to be set free by Jesus from corruption, from disorder, from eternal death, and we are all called to play a part in the restoration. Pope Francis in Laudato Si uses St. Francis as an example on how we can be one with the earth, bringing no harm to it, but also seeking to restore its goodness and original innocence. St. Francis attempted to do this by addressing the disorder within himself first, and having addressed that, he could share that reordering with creation. So too for us, we need to sort ourselves out first, for unless we can address the sin and disorder within ourselves, any attempts to help creation are mere window dressing. For even if we could somehow perfect the environment without also addressing the disorder within ourselves, we won't have achieved much. For our ultimate goal is our home with the Trinity and all the saints at the final resurrection of the dead. Pope Francis finishes his encyclical reminding us that while we have an obligation to care for this earth, ultimately it is not our final destination. he writes, "Even now we are journeying towards the Sabbath of eternity, the New Jerusalem, towards our common home in heaven." Jesus says, "I make all things new." Eternal life will be a shared experience of awe in which each creature, resplendently transfigured, will take its rightful place and have something to give those poor men and women who will have been liberated once and for all. As St. Paul says with hope in the second reading, what we suffer in this life can never be compared to the glory as yet unrevealed, which is waiting for us. So, brothers and sisters, let us seek to address that within us which is contrary to God's original design first. Then let us go forward caring for the earth entrusted to our care, so that all may benefit equitably from God's wonderful bounty, and no one suffer the effects of an environment abused. Let us also be mindful that on the other hand, we don't become attached to an earthly home that will one day, irrespective of all that we do, pass away. For it will one day be replaced by an eternal home, perfected only by the one who alone can perfect anything, where there will be no more injustice, no more corruption, no more disorder, no more suffering, no more death.